My name is Emily Carter. I'm 28 years old, born and raised in Portland, Oregon. If you looked at my life from the outside, maybe you'd think it was quiet, maybe even boring. I work as a junior marketing manager for a small but ambitious eco-friendly cosmetics brand. I have a cat named Milo, a sister who lives 2 states away, and parents who still call me every Sunday like clockwork. I always thought of myself as sensible, maybe too trusting, but careful in my own way. I liked my routines, my morning coffee, my spreadsheets, and to-do lists. I used to believe that if you loved someone, you didn't question them too much. Trust was the glue that kept things together, at least that's what I told myself. I met Ryan at a friend's New Year's Eve party when I was 25. He was 30 then, tall, warm smile, the kind of man who made everyone in the room feel seen. He wasn't handsome in a movie star way, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of mischief, a kind of charm that pulled you in. He said he ran a small online retail business, something to do with vintage vinyl records. I didn't really understand it, but I liked that he seemed ambitious, independent, different from the guys I'd dated before who all seemed to blend together into one polite, forgettable blur. We talked for hours that night, tucked away in a corner of the party, oblivious to the countdown, the noise, the confetti cannons that went off at midnight. I remember thinking, this is it. This is one of those moments you're supposed to remember when you tell your kids how you met. He asked for my number before I even left the party, no games, no waiting 3 days. He texted me while I was still in the Uber home. Tonight was perfect. When can I see you again? It felt like falling asleep in a warm bed after a long, cold day. Easy. Safe. Or so I thought. Within 6 months, we were living together. He moved into my tiny apartment downtown, the one with the creaky floors and the view of the old library. I didn't mind. I liked having him there. He made dinners when I worked late. He left little notes in my lunch bag, love you, don't forget you're amazing. I thought I'd found my person. Someone solid. Someone real. Of course, there were little things. Money things. Sometimes, at the end of the month, he'd be pacing the living room, sighing heavily, rubbing his temples. He'd tell me about some unexpected invoice, or a supplier who hadn't paid him on time, or a credit card he'd maxed out back when he was starting his first company. He always seemed embarrassed to tell me. Sometimes he'd say, I hate asking, but can I borrow from our joint account just until this clears up? He'd promise to put it right back. He always said it with that same gentle guilt in his voice that made me rush to reassure him. Of course, Ryan. We're a team. It's our money. We'll get through this together. I remember the first time I saw the unpaid bills stacked in his desk drawer. I was looking for a stapler. He caught me before I could pick them up. He closed the drawer so fast it rattled. I still remember how my heart skipped a beat, that tiny, cold prickle that makes you wonder, wait. Should I ask more questions? But then he kissed my forehead, laughed it off, told me it was all under control, and I let it go. I always let it go. A year later, we got married in my parents' backyard. It wasn't big, just family, close friends, a rented tent in case it rained, it did, a little. My father gave me away, my mother cried through the vows, and Ryan held my hand so tightly while he promised forever that my fingers went numb. I thought that was what love was supposed to feel like, a grip you never wanted to slip out of. If someone had tapped me on the shoulder that day and whispered, he's lying to you. He's not who you think he is. I would have laughed. I would have said, you don't know him like I do. I would have defended him. Even now, when I think about that version of me, the one in the white dress and borrowed veil, I want to shake her by the shoulders and say, look harder. Ask him. Demand the truth. But I didn't. I chose to believe him because love, to me, was trust, blind, stubborn, absolute. We moved into a bigger apartment after the wedding, 2 bedrooms this time, so we could grow into it. He said he wanted a home office for his business calls. I was happy to have more space. I bought a new couch we couldn't really afford. He promised me we'd pay it off soon as his old debts were cleared. Always soon. That was the first year. The year of excuses, explanations, apologies whispered in bed in the dark while I stared at the ceiling, telling myself it would get better. Because that's what you do when you love someone, you wait for it to get better. I didn't know then that the worst part wasn't the debt, or the lies about the debt. The worst part was how easy it was for him to lie to me, and how easy it was for me to believe it. I wish I could say there was one moment that changed everything, a thunderclap of revelation. But the truth is, the real story, the ugly truth I'd been sleeping beside for so long, was waiting for me quietly, just out of sight, while I kept telling myself that love was enough to cover any hole he dug. I was wrong. And this is how I found out. The first real crack in the story came on an ordinary Tuesday in late March. I remember because it had been raining for days, the kind of cold, miserable drizzle that makes the whole city feel damp and gray. I'd just come home from work, drenched to the knees because I'd forgotten my umbrella in the break room. I found Ryan at the kitchen table, hunched over his laptop, headphones on, phone pressed between his shoulder and ear. He didn't notice me right away. I stood there for a minute, dripping onto the hardwood floor, listening. He was speaking softly, but the tone was wrong, clipped, impatient. No, I told you. She doesn't know. Of course she doesn't. I'll handle it. Just keep your mouth shut until I say otherwise. I felt something cold bloom in my chest, like someone dropped an ice cube straight into my heart. He looked up then, saw me standing there like a ghost in my own hallway. He gave me that crooked smile, the one that used to make me melt. Hey, baby. You're home early. He closed the laptop with a soft click, pulled off the headphones like nothing had happened. Bad day at work? I didn't ask who he was talking to. I didn't ask what I wasn't supposed to know. Instead, I kissed his cheek, told him I'd make us some tea. I kept the questions in my mouth like a bitter pill I was too afraid to swallow. After that day, I started noticing things. Small at first, receipts stuffed into his jacket pockets for things that didn't make sense. Hundreds of dollars spent at places I'd never heard of. A storage unit rental slip crumpled at the bottom of the laundry hamper. When I asked about it, he said it was for old business files. He said it so easily, so casually, that I almost believed him. Almost. A week later, I went to that storage unit. I told myself I just needed to see. Just to stop the buzzing in my head that kept me awake at night. I took the spare car keys, drove out on a Saturday when he thought I was at my sister's baby shower across town. I remember standing in front of that roll-up door, hands shaking so badly I could barely fit the key in the lock. Inside, I found boxes. Dozens of them, all taped shut. I opened one, half expecting to find something scandalous, secret gambling debts, stacks of hidden cash, something that would finally explain why my husband always seemed broke despite all his promises. But the boxes were full of ordinary things. Old clothes. Kitchen utensils. A battered rocking chair I recognized from his mother's basement. It made no sense. Nothing made sense. I sat down on the cold concrete floor and just stared at it all, trying to connect the dots. Why hide this from me? Why lie about something so mundane? That night, I told him I'd run into his mom at the grocery store. A lie. I wanted to see his face. He froze for half a second, just a flicker, then he laughed it off. You should have called me. I would have come by to say hi. That tiny pause told me everything. He was hiding something. Something bigger than a pile of old junk in a storage unit. I started going through our bank statements when he was asleep. I felt like a thief in my own home, tiptoeing into his office at 2 a.m., heart pounding so loud I was sure it would wake him. Passwords weren't hard to guess. He always used the same variations: our anniversary, Milo's name, his old high school mascot. What I found didn't make sense at first. Transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Regular withdrawals, small enough to not raise flags, but steady, like a drip from a leaking faucet. Thousands of dollars over the course of a year, funneling out of our joint savings. When I asked him about it, carefully, like I was stepping around a sleeping bear, he sighed, rubbed his temples, and launched into a familiar monologue. It was an old debt, he said. A mistake from years ago, before he met me. He was embarrassed, didn't want me to worry. He was handling it. He promised it would be over soon. He always promised. But this time, I didn't nod and let it go. I asked for proof. Who was he paying? Where were the receipts? He snapped then, for the first time. His voice got sharp, his eyes cold. He accused me of not trusting him, of snooping like I was trying to catch him cheating. He made me feel small for even asking. I almost backed down. Almost. But that night, I didn't sleep beside him. I lay on the couch, Milo curled against my chest, and stared at the dark ceiling while the rain ticked against the windows. By morning, I knew I needed help. I called my older sister, Natalie. She's the practical one in the family, the kind of person who keeps every receipt, files her taxes in January, and always knows the right questions to ask. When I told her what I'd found, she didn't sound surprised. Just angry. You can't just sit there waiting for him to come clean. He won't. Hire someone. Find out where the money's going. And do not tell him you're looking. It felt so dramatic, like something out of a bad TV movie. But a week later, I was sitting in a cafe downtown with a private investigator named Greg Morton. He had kind eyes and the kind of calm voice that made me want to confess everything. I handed him a folder with bank statements I'd printed at work, my hands shaking so hard the papers slipped out of the clip. I just want to know the truth, I said. I could hear my own voice, too soft, too polite, like I was asking for the weather forecast instead of evidence that my husband might be lying to me about everything. Greg nodded like he'd heard this 100 times before. Maybe he had. He told me it would take a couple of weeks. He told me not to tell Ryan anything. He told me to act normal. So that's what I did. I came home every night, kissed my husband on the cheek, listened to him complain about overdue invoices and stubborn clients. I sat across from him at dinner and asked about his day. I let him hold me at night, even when his touch made my skin crawl. I waited. And waited. And all the while, a tiny part of me still hoped he'd sit me down and say, "Emily, here's what's really going on. I'm sorry for not telling you sooner." He never did. The truth came from someone else, a stranger I paid to look where I wasn't allowed to look. And when Greg finally called me to say, "I think you should sit down for this," I knew that whatever I was about to hear would change everything. When Greg asked me to meet him in person, I knew it was bad. He could have just emailed me his report, but he didn't. He chose a quiet corner booth in a coffee shop near the river, far enough from my neighborhood that I wouldn't run into anyone who knew me. I remember staring out the window as I waited, watching raindrops slide down the glass like they were racing each other. I felt hollow, like my bones had been scooped out and replaced with dread. Greg sat down across from me, gave me a tired smile that didn't reach his eyes. He slid a plain manila envelope across the table, like we were in a cheap spy movie. His hands were calm, steady. Mine were clenched in my lap so tightly my nails left little half-moons in my skin. "You okay, Emily?" he asked gently. I wasn't. But I nodded anyway. He took a breath. "I want you to know, none of this is your fault. And you did the right thing coming to me." I hated that he said that. I didn't want pity. I wanted the facts, cold, hard, undeniable. He tapped the envelope. "Your husband doesn't have any debts. At least not the kind he's been telling you about. There are no old creditors, no lawsuits, no business partners hounding him for money. In fact," he paused, almost like he didn't want to say it, "he's been putting the money aside. Every cent he's taken out of your accounts has gone into a separate savings fund." I frowned. Savings? What kind of savings? Greg flipped open his laptop and showed me a spreadsheet, rows of transactions, account numbers, dates. He's been building this for over a year. Small amounts, spread out so it doesn't raise red flags. And then it sits in an account under his name. But here's the part you should see. He clicked over to another screen, a scanned contract, a property purchase agreement. Ryan's name was right there at the top. And so was hers. Patricia Carter. His mother. My stomach dropped. "What is this?" Greg turned the screen toward me fully. "He's buying his mother a condo. Paid in full, cash deal. He's been funneling every dollar out of your joint accounts to make this happen. And from what I can tell, the rest of his family knows. He's the only one who didn't tell you." I stared at the screen, the words blurring. For a second, I felt something absurd bubble up in my throat, laughter. Not because it was funny, but because it was so stupidly mundane. Not gambling. Not drugs. Not a secret affair. Just his mother. His mother, who smiled at me every Thanksgiving, who hugged me at our wedding like she was so happy to welcome me into her family. His mother, who knew. I didn't know what to say. I remember my lips moving but no words coming out. Greg reached across the table, his voice low, careful. Emily. This is betrayal. Maybe not the kind you expected, but it's still betrayal. I nodded numbly. My tea had gone cold. People around us were laughing, talking about weekend plans, tapping at laptops. Life went on while mine was cracking open at the seams. When I got home that night, I felt like I was wearing someone else's skin. Ryan was on the couch watching TV, a beer in hand, barefoot and relaxed like he didn't have a single secret in the world. He looked up at me, smiled, patted the seat next to him. Hey, babe. You okay? You look tired. I stood there, my coat still on, bag slung over my shoulder, staring at him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to slap the bottle out of his hand. I wanted to ask him why. Why lie? Why take my money, our money, and funnel it away for someone else without even telling me? But I didn't. I heard Greg's voice in my head, be smart, Emily. Get your ducks in a row. Don't give him a chance to hide anything else. So I sat next to him. I let him drape his arm around my shoulders. I let him kiss my temple. I let him believe I knew nothing, that I was still the good, trusting wife who never asked for proof. Over the next week, I pretended my life was normal. I went to work, came home, cooked dinner. I smiled when I wanted to break things. At night, I lay awake beside him, listening to the rise and fall of his breath while my mind spun in circles. I checked the account Greg had shown me every day. Watched the balance tick up. Watched him bleed me dry with a smile on his face. I started making copies of everything, bank statements, emails, text messages. I opened a separate account in my name only and quietly moved what little I could scrape together. I stopped putting my paycheck into our joint account. He didn't notice. Or maybe he didn't care, he probably thought he'd gotten enough already. One night, I dreamed I was standing at the edge of a cliff. Below me, the ocean roared and crashed. Ryan was beside me, whispering that it was fine, that we could jump, that he'd hold my hand the whole way down. And in the dream, I let go. I stepped back. I watched him fall alone. When I woke up, I knew exactly what I had to do. I called Natalie the next morning. I told her everything. I heard her inhale sharply on the other end of the line, then she said, in that calm, terrifying voice she uses when she's really angry, "You need to get out, Em. You need to get out now." So I made a plan. I found a lawyer, a friend of Natalie's from college, someone discreet. I packed a suitcase and hid it in my trunk. I told Ryan I had a work retreat coming up, 3 days out of town. He didn't even look up from his phone when I said it. That Friday morning, I kissed him goodbye. He asked me to bring him back some fancy coffee from the place I told him I'd be staying near. I said I would. Then I got in my car, drove across town, and filed for divorce. Sitting in that lawyer's office, signing my name over and over on paper after paper, I felt something inside me settle, like a tight knot finally loosening. This wasn't how I imagined my marriage ending. But it was how I was going to end the lie. When the lawyer asked if I wanted to tell him in person or have the papers served while I was gone, I didn't hesitate. Serve him, I said. Let him find out the way I found out everything else. Without warning. When I walked out of that office, the sun was breaking through the clouds for the first time in days. I stood there on the sidewalk, breathing it in, the faint promise that maybe, just maybe, the storm was finally over. I didn't go home that night. I didn't even drive past our building. Instead, I checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town, the kind with flickering neon signs and scratchy blankets that smell faintly of bleach. I paid cash. I told the front desk clerk my name was Emma Lewis, the first alias I'd ever used in my life. He didn't care. He didn't even look at me twice. In that stuffy little room, I lay on the lumpy bed, fully clothed, staring at the water stain on the ceiling while my phone buzzed and buzzed. Ryan called once. Twice. 5 times. Then the messages started. Ryan, hey, where are you? Call me. Ryan, are you at the retreat? You didn't text when you got there. Ryan, this isn't funny. Call me. Ryan, why is there a guy at the door with papers? What the hell is this? Ryan, you need to answer me. Ryan, Emily. I swear to God, pick up the phone. I didn't answer. Not once. Instead, I turned the phone over, screen down, and forced myself to listen to the low hum of the air conditioner until his calls stopped feeling like an emergency and more like the buzzing of an insect you can just swat away. The lawyer said I didn't have to talk to him at all if I didn't want to. Everything would go through them now. But part of me wanted him to call. Wanted to hear the panic crack through that calm, charming voice that had convinced me of so many lies. He called again the next morning, the same desperate tone, but now tinged with anger. How could you do this? How could you blindside me? He accused me of being dramatic. Of being ungrateful. Of overreacting. I didn't respond. He switched tactics. He promised he could explain everything, that it wasn't what it looked like, that it was all for us, for our future, for our family. I almost laughed when I read that one. Our family. Meaning his mother. The same mother who knew every dollar he stole from me while she hugged me at family dinners and called me her sweet girl. Natalie called to check on me that night. I told her about the messages. She told me to block him, but I couldn't bring myself to do it yet. It was like poking at a bruise is painful, but I needed to feel it to remember why I was here, alone in a motel, instead of back in that apartment pretending my life was still whole. 3 days passed. Then 4. Ryan's messages shifted from pleading to threatening and back again, like he couldn't decide if he was the victim or the villain. He told me I was humiliating him, that I was tearing our family apart, that I was selfish. I read every word with a calm I didn't know I possessed. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just read them like I was reading a stranger's story, a story I'd outgrown. On the 5th day, he showed up at my work. I saw him through the glass doors of the lobby while I was coming back from lunch, standing there in his good coat, hands shoved in his pockets, that look on his face that used to make me want to run to him and make it better. Not this time. I stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. He spotted me, called my name, took a step forward like he thought he could pull me back into whatever script he'd been writing for us all along. Emily. Just talk to me, please. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. I shook my head. My pulse thundered in my ears but my voice came out steady. It's done, Ryan. You know that. He stepped closer. I did this for you. For us. You don't understand? Stop. I didn't shout. Didn't cry. Just that one word, sharp and flat, cutting through the excuses he'd polished so well. You didn't do this for us. You did it for yourself. And you lied. You lied every day for a year and made me feel crazy for asking why. People were starting to stare, coworkers passing by, strangers on the sidewalk. I didn't care. For once, I wanted people to see him for what he was. His face twisted, part pleading, part furious. You're blowing this out of proportion. It's my mother. What was I supposed to do, let her live in that rundown old place forever? She needed help. We could afford it. I laughed then, an ugly, sharp sound that made him flinch. We? There was never a we, Ryan. There was you. And your secret. And me paying for it while you kissed my forehead goodnight and told me not to worry. He tried to reach for my arm but I stepped back, just enough that he froze. The look on his face told me everything. He still thought he could fix this if he could just talk enough, charm enough, wear me down enough. The same way he'd done when the bills piled up and I asked too many questions. Don't come here again, I said. Don't text me. Don't call me. If you have something to say it to my lawyer. Emily. I turned and walked away. My legs were trembling so hard I thought they'd buckle, but they didn't. I didn't look back. Not once. I spent another 2 weeks in that motel while my lawyer untangled the accounts, froze what could be frozen, filed motions to protect what little I still had. Natalie came by every other day with takeout and a bottle of cheap wine. We sat on the scratchy carpet and made lists, what I needed to pack, what I'd leave behind, who I'd have to call to change my address when it was finally over. One night, halfway through a cold carton of pad thai, Natalie looked at me and said, "You know you're stronger than him, right? He didn't think you'd ever stand up to him. That's why he got away with it so long." I didn't say anything at first. Then I whispered the words I'd been rolling around in my head like a prayer, never again. Never again will I believe words without proof. It didn't feel like victory yet. But it felt like a start. 2 weeks after I left, I stepped back into the apartment for the first time. I didn't want to. My lawyer offered to send someone to pack my things. Natalie begged to come with me, but I needed to see it. I needed to see what was left of my life in that space, to stand in the middle of it and remind myself that it didn't own me anymore. Ryan was supposed to be gone. The lawyers had made that clear. He'd been served, he'd signed the temporary agreement, he wasn't allowed to be there. But the second I turned my key in the lock and pushed the door open, I knew he was inside. His shoes were by the door, the ones he only wore around the house, the laces forever half undone like he couldn't be bothered to finish anything properly. I stood there for a moment, bag still on my shoulder, my hand on the knob, staring at those shoes. The silence behind the door felt thick, stale, like the apartment was holding its breath. He stepped into the hallway from the kitchen. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him, unshaven, hair sticking up at odd angles, wearing an old t-shirt I'd been planning to toss out for years. His eyes landed on me like a weight. "You came back," he said. He tried to smile, but it didn't stick. "I knew you'd come back." I let the door close behind me, slow and deliberate. "You're not supposed to be here, Ryan." He shrugged like we were talking about forgetting to take out the trash. "It's still my place, too." I looked past him. The living room was a mess, half-packed boxes scattered across the floor, drawers pulled out and left open, clothes spilling out of them like a crime scene. Milo's food bowl was empty in the corner. My heart clenched at that. I hadn't seen my cat in weeks. He must have heard me because Milo came trotting out from under the couch, tail high, his little paws thumping on the floor as he headbutted my leg. Ryan watched me kneel down and scoop Milo into my arms. He made a soft, scoffing sound. "You're really taking the cat?" I ignored him, pressing my face into Milo's fur, breathing in his warmth. He was purring so hard it rattled through my arms. "You shouldn't be here, Ryan," I repeated, my voice muffled against Milo's head. He stepped closer. Too close. I could smell stale beer on his breath, see the raw, angry circles under his eyes. "I just wanted to talk." "You won't answer my calls." "You blocked my number." "I did that for a reason." His hands twitched at his sides like he didn't know what to do with them. "I just want you to understand. It wasn't personal, Em. She's my mother. She's sick. She needed somewhere decent to live. You wouldn't have understood." Something hot and vicious rose in my chest, an anger I'd been swallowing for months, years maybe. I set Milo gently on the floor and straightened up. For the first time, I looked him dead in the eyes and didn't feel small. "Don't stand there and tell me what I would or wouldn't understand. You never even gave me the chance. You lied to me, Ryan. Every day. You made me feel guilty for asking where our money was going while you handed it over to your mother behind my back. You made me think I was crazy." He flinched at that, just a flicker. Then the charm snapped back into place, brittle and desperate. He reached for my hand. I didn't let him touch me. "Emily, come on. You're blowing this up. It's not like I was gambling or cheating. I was doing something good." "No," I laughed, a sharp, hollow sound that bounced off the walls. "You were doing something good for her. Not for us. Not for me. You didn't even trust me enough to tell me. You treated me like a wallet you could smile at while you picked it clean." His face twisted. "That's not fair." "No, Ryan. What's not fair is that you made me feel like you and I were in this together while you lied to my face. You let me plan our future while you planned a different one with your mother. And the worst part? You'd do it again if you thought you could get away with it." I stepped back, scooping Milo into his carrier. Ryan's hand dropped. He looked at the floor, then back at me, like he was searching for some new lie that might work, some soft spot I hadn't already armored over. When he found nothing, he tried one last line, the same line he'd used 100 times when we fought about money. His voice softened, eyes wide and pleading, like the first night I'd met him when he told me he'd never hurt me. "You still love me, Em. I know you do. We can fix this. Just give me another chance." I zipped the carrier, Milo's tail flicking behind the mesh. I lifted it off the floor and shifted the weight onto my hip. "No, Ryan," I said quietly. "I don't love you anymore. I loved who I thought you were. But that man doesn't exist. I didn't wait for him to answer. I stepped around him, careful not to touch him, careful not to let him close the gap again. I grabbed the bag I'd left in the hallway, the one with a few things I hadn't had time to pack before I ran. I paused by the door, looking at the cheap print on the wall, the wedding photo of us on the side table. I left it all. Let him keep the ghosts. As I stepped into the hallway, Ryan didn't follow. He just stood there in the middle of the mess he'd made, his mouth opening and closing like he still couldn't believe I was really walking out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. The soft click behind me felt louder than any shout. When the door closed behind me that day, it felt like 1,000 pounds had lifted off my chest, but in its place was a cold, echoing emptiness. I stood in the hallway for a moment, Milo's carrier digging into my hip, my keys cold and sharp in my hand. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. For a second, I thought I might cry right there in the hall, in front of the elevator doors, the faded carpet, the familiar smell of stale hallway coffee. But no tears came. There was nothing left in me for tears. Just resolve. A hard, bright line drawn right through the middle of my old life. I drove to Natalie's house that night, Milo complaining the whole way from the carrier in the passenger seat. The city passed by in gray streaks, neon signs, street lights reflected on wet pavement. I watched it all through the windshield like I was watching a movie about someone else's life. Natalie opened her front door before I'd even parked properly. She must have been standing by the window, waiting. She didn't say anything when she saw me, she just stepped aside so I could come in, like she knew that if she spoke, I might crack in half. I set Milo's carrier down in her warm, bright kitchen. He bolted out the second I unzipped it and vanished under her dining table. Natalie wrapped her arms around me, tight enough that it squeezed the breath out of my lungs. For a moment, I let my head drop to her shoulder. I let her be strong for me, just for that heartbeat in the kitchen light. Then I pulled back. I didn't want pity. Not now. Not when I'd finally done the one thing I'd spent so long telling myself I couldn't do. I did it, I said. My voice sounded rough, like I'd swallowed gravel. It's over. Natalie nodded. She poured us each a glass of wine, cheap boxed Chardonnay, the kind she always kept for nights when the world felt too sharp. We sat at her kitchen island, knees touching. She didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. I'm proud of you, Em, she said softly. I didn't feel proud. I felt scraped raw. But beneath the exhaustion, there was something else too, a thin, sharp thread of certainty that hummed in my veins every time I replayed Ryan's face as I closed the door. The weeks that followed blurred into a quiet routine. Natalie let me stay in her guest room while the lawyers did their work. I went back to my job, kept my head down, ignored the whispers that trickled through the office when people found out I'd filed for divorce. Apparently Ryan had been telling anyone who'd listen that I was unstable, vindictive, overdramatic. Let him talk. Words were cheap, I knew that better than anyone now. I opened a new bank account. Changed my passwords. Moved my last paycheck into an account Ryan couldn't touch. It felt like reclaiming tiny corners of my life, one login at a time. At night, I lay in the squeaky guest bed, Milo curled into the crook of my arm and made lists in my head. Things I'd keep. Things I'd leave behind. Things I'd never, ever do again. Some nights, the doubt still found me. The whisper that maybe I'd been too harsh, too quick to cut the cord. But then I'd remember the storage unit full of my money, the soft way Ryan lied while he kissed my shoulder in the dark. And the doubt would curl up and die in the pit of my stomach. One Saturday morning, about a month after I left him, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I almost let it ring out. But something made me answer. Emily Carter, a woman's voice asked. Crisp, professional. Yes? This is Denise Mallory, from Carter and Hillman Real Estate. I'm calling to confirm the final payment transfer for the Riverside condo purchase. The paperwork shows your name as the secondary account holder. We just need your signature to finalize the deed. I sat down so hard I nearly missed the chair behind me. I'm sorry, what? She repeated it. Slowly. Patiently. Like she was used to explaining this to confused clients. Secondary account holder. Me. Ryan had bought the place in both our names. My money. His mother's name. But also, mine. Legally, at least. A detail he must have thought would keep the bank happy, or make the transaction smoother. A detail he probably never intended for me to find out until it was too late. I thanked the woman, told her I'd call back. Then I sat there at Natalie's kitchen table, phone still clutched in my hand, and laughed. Really laughed, a wild, sharp bark that made Milo jump onto the floor and run for cover. Natalie came in, half awake, mug of coffee in hand. What's so funny? I told her. She listened, her eyebrows climbing higher with every word. When I finished, she set her mug down and let out a low whistle. So technically, you own half that condo. Technically, I said, my voice shaking with disbelief. Half of my own money paid for a place I never knew about, and now it's mine. Or at least, half mine. Natalie grinned, a feral, bright grin I'd never seen on her before. You know what this means, right? I nodded. Oh, I know. 2 days later, I sat in my lawyer's office again. He raised an eyebrow when I told him about the condo. He asked if I wanted to sign it over, wash my hands of the whole mess. No, I said. My voice was calm. I want my half. Or I want him to pay me every cent I put into it. He can keep his mother's name on it, but he's not keeping my money. And when Ryan's lawyer called mine, shouting, furious, demanding to know why I was making this harder than it needed to be, I sat in that squeaky office chair and smiled. Let him rage. Let him realize that the woman he'd treated like an open wallet was gone for good, replaced by someone who knew her worth down to the last stolen cent. The final meeting was short and ugly. We sat across from each other at a polished conference table, our lawyers flanking us like weary referees. Ryan wouldn't look me in the eye. He tapped a pen against the table until his lawyer told him to stop. They offered me a payout. More than I expected. Enough to walk away clean, to start over somewhere new if I wanted. I signed the papers with hands that didn't tremble. Ryan's signature looked like a child's beside mine, messy, rushed, desperate to be done. When it was over, I stood, gathered my purse, and didn't say goodbye. He didn't either. Outside the glass doors, the sun was bright on the pavement. I let it warm my face, the wind tangling my hair, while I breathed in the taste of freedom, raw, a little bitter, but mine. After the final papers were signed, after the bank transfers cleared and my lawyer's last email dropped into my inbox like a full stop at the end of a too-long sentence, there was nothing left tying me to Ryan. No hidden threads, no last hooks to drag me back. It felt strange, not like a victory lap, but like standing in a room that used to be filled with noise and finding only silence. Natalie offered to open a bottle of champagne that night, real champagne, not the cheap sparkling stuff we'd used at my wedding. But I told her no. I didn't want to celebrate. Not yet. Instead, we sat on her couch under a pile of mismatched blankets while Milo snored at my feet, and we watched some mindless reality show where rich strangers screamed at each other over who said what at a fake dinner party. Halfway through, Natalie glanced over at me. What now? She asked. I didn't know. That was the truth. I'd spent so long looking backward, digging through lies, hunting for proof, bracing for the next betrayal. Now there was nothing to chase. No emails to check for secret transfers. No storage units to search. No voice in my head whispering, maybe you're wrong. Maybe he really does love you. I thought freedom would feel like a door flung wide open. Instead, it felt like standing on a blank page. No instructions. No map. Just me, the pen in my hand, and a question, what now? The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. Milo was curled in the crook of my knees, snoring softly, his paws twitching like he was chasing something in a dream. Natalie's house was quiet, she was still asleep in her room down the hall. The kitchen smelled like leftover coffee grounds and the lavender candle she always forgot to blow out before bed. I sat at the table with a mug of tea and my laptop. I opened a blank document and stared at it for a long time. Then, slowly, I started typing. Not a plan exactly, not yet. Just a list. Things I know for sure. I can live alone. I can pay my own bills. I can survive a lie that should have broken me. I don't believe words without proof. Not anymore. I won't apologize for asking questions. I stared at the list until my eyes blurred. Then I added one more. I get to decide what happens next. Over the next month, I moved out of Natalie's spare room. Not back to that old apartment, that place was dead to me now. I found a tiny studio downtown with creaky floors and a view of the river, not unlike the place I'd lived before Ryan. Some nights I wondered if I'd just made a perfect circle back to where I started. But then I'd look around and remember, no, this time it was mine. Every square foot. Every cracked window pane. Every squeaky step in the hall. The first night I slept there, Milo padded from room to room like he was doing an inspection. When he finally curled up next to me on my thrifted mattress, I exhaled so deeply it felt like letting go of years I'd carried on my back. I ran into Ryan once more, by accident. 2 months after the papers were final, I saw him at the grocery store near my new place. Of course it would be the frozen foods aisle, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the hum of the freezers loud in the stale air. He saw me first. He froze, half bent over a box of frozen pizza. For a second, we just stood there, staring at each other like we were strangers who recognized a ghost. He spoke first. Emily. His voice still made something in my chest tighten, a reflex, old muscle memory that hadn't fully faded. But it didn't hurt this time. It didn't feel like hope either. Just recognition of a scar that had already healed. "Hi, Ryan," I said, calm as the glass doors behind him. He took a step closer, then seemed to think better of it. He looked tired, older than I remembered, like the mask he used to wear for everyone else had cracked around the edges. There was no apology on his face, but no triumph either. Just a flicker of something like regret that passed so quickly I almost missed it. "How have you been?" he asked, like we were two old coworkers who hadn't seen each other since the company picnic. "I'm good," I said simply. I meant it, too. Maybe not happy yet, but good. He nodded, glanced at Milo's cat treats poking out of my basket. His mouth twitched, like he wanted to say something else, but the words died there. "Good. I didn't want them." "I should go," I said. "Take care, Ryan." He didn't follow. He didn't call after me. He just watched as I pushed my cart past him, the freezer hum filling the silence between us. That was the last time I saw him. Freedom didn't come all at once. It wasn't fireworks or champagne or a wild trip to Bali like the movies tell you it'll be when you find yourself again. It came in quiet moments, paying my rent on time with my own name on the lease. Watching Milo chase dust motes in a sunbeam on my cheap secondhand couch. Buying a pint of ice cream without worrying who'd ask where the money went. Sometimes I still caught myself flinching when someone offered me something too good to be true, a deal, a promise, a smile that felt too easy. But I didn't hate that reflex. I earned it. It was my guard dog now, the part of me that wouldn't let someone slip a hand into my pocket while telling me it was love. One night, a few months later, Natalie came over with takeout and 2 tiny bottles of cheap champagne. She raised hers toward me across my cluttered little kitchen counter. "To freedom," she said. I clinked mine against hers. "To proof." She laughed. "To proof?" I grinned. To never believing a damn thing without it. We drank straight from the bottles. Milo licked the edge of the takeout box and then fell asleep in my lap while we watched bad reality TV with the volume too low to really hear it. I thought about everything I'd lost, the time, the money, the trust I'd handed over like an unguarded secret. But more than that, I thought about what I'd gained, the knowledge that no one would ever get to decide my life for me again. That the next promise I'd believe would be backed by evidence I could touch with my own hands. Not words. Not empty stories. Not excuses dressed up as love. Proof. Always proof. A year passed. 1 year from the day I stood in that lawyer's office, pen in hand, signing my name on the first set of divorce papers. 1 year from the day I stood in my old living room with Ryan's lies stacked around me like cardboard boxes waiting to be unpacked. The anniversary came and went like any other day. No candles. No tears. Just me, my cat, a cup of coffee by the window of my tiny apartment, and a calendar notification I'd forgotten to disable. 1 year, divorce filed. I laughed when I saw it. Milo meowed like he was laughing too. In that year, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. There was no grand plan, just small steps, one after the other, each one proof that I could stand on my own feet. I took on a promotion at work. Bigger projects, bigger paychecks. I learned how to read a contract down to the fine print. No more trusting someone to handle the money while I smiled and looked away. I opened a retirement account, a savings account, a tiny side account labeled Freedom Fund. Every month, a few dollars went into it, even if it was only enough for a cheap dinner or a bus ticket out of town if I ever needed to run again. I learned how to change a tire. How to reset my own router when it glitched at midnight. How to talk to the building superintendent about a leaky faucet without apologizing for bothering him. I learned that I could be soft and strong at the same time, gentle with my friends, sharp when someone tried to test my boundaries. People started to notice. At work, my boss complimented my new confidence, though she said it like she didn't quite know where it came from. My parents called more often, trying to bridge the distance Ryan had quietly built between us when he'd made it easier for me to rely on him instead of them. My mother asked me once if I'd ever date again, if I wanted to. I told her I didn't know. And I didn't. Maybe someday. But for now, I was enough. Just me, my cat, my apartment that smelled like secondhand books and lemon soap. Sometimes I thought about that condo, the one Ryan bought for his mother with my money. Technically, the payout I'd taken made me whole. Technically, I didn't care anymore. But sometimes, when I was brushing my teeth or rinsing out a mug at midnight, I'd imagine her sitting in that place I'd paid for, arranging throw pillows on a couch she bought with money I'd earned. And instead of feeling angry, I felt nothing. A clean nothing, like a room you sweep out for the last time before closing the door forever. It wasn't my problem anymore. It never really had been. I'd just been dragged into it because I believed a man who told me we were on the same side. We never were. A few months after the anniversary, Natalie and I took a weekend trip to the coast. Just two sisters and Milo in his little travel crate, glaring at us the whole drive like we'd personally betrayed him by taking him out of his kingdom. We rented a weather-beaten cabin that smelled like salt and old driftwood. The waves crashed all night like they were trying to remind me, "You're here, you're here, you're here." The second night, Natalie and I sat on the deck wrapped in blankets, passing a bottle of cheap red wine back and forth. The wind bit at our cheeks but neither of us moved. It felt good to be a little cold. To feel the air sting and know I could warm myself up again. Out of nowhere, Natalie asked, "Do you ever think about him?" I didn't pretend I didn't know who she meant. I just tipped my head back, watching the stars claw through the clouds. "Not really," I said. It was the truth. He was never who I thought he was. So sometimes I think about her, the version of me who believed him. I wonder why I let myself stay that long. Natalie made a soft sound in her throat. "You know why?" I nodded. Yeah. I wanted to believe him more than I wanted to know the truth. Back then, the lie was warmer than the cold truth. Easier. "And now?" she asked. I smiled into the wind. "Now? Now I'd rather be cold." She laughed and clinked her mug against mine. "That's my sister." When we got back to the city, I didn't slip back into my old routines. I started new ones instead. Every Saturday, I went to a little cafe that opened down the block, a place with mismatched chairs and a sleepy old Labrador who snored behind the counter while the barista pulled shots. I'd bring my laptop, my notebooks, scraps of ideas for stories I'd always wanted to write but never had time for when I was too busy putting out Ryan's fires. At first, the words came slow, like a tap that hadn't been turned in years. Rusty, stubborn. But they came. The more I wrote, the more I realized I didn't care if they were good, they were mine. No one else's truth. No one else's secret. Just mine. Some nights, when I closed my laptop at that little cafe and walked home in the dark with the river glittering beside me, I felt it, the quiet, ordinary thrill of building a life I trusted because it was built by me. No borrowed stories. No second-hand lies. About 6 months ago, a coworker named Caleb started sitting with me at lunch. At first, I thought nothing of it. We'd worked together for over a year, but he'd always kept to himself, the quiet type, glasses sliding down his nose, a little shy in meetings but sharp when it counted. One afternoon, over wilted cafeteria salads and bad coffee, he asked if I wanted to see a new exhibit at the art museum. His voice cracked a little when he asked, like he wasn't sure if I'd hear what he was really saying underneath. I almost said no. The old voice in my head, the one that once believed Ryan's soft promises, whispered, "Don't trust so easy. Don't start over. Don't open that door." But I didn't listen to that voice anymore. I listened to the stronger one, the one that said, "Take your time. Just watch. Watch what people do, not what they say." So I said yes. Not because I was ready for something new, but because I was ready to see if I could be ready. Caleb didn't promise me anything that night. He didn't lean in too close or tell me about some big plan for the future. He just handed me a museum ticket, pointed at a weird, bright painting on the wall, and said, "That looks like a cat Milo would hate." And we laughed together. That was all. I don't know where any of that goes, maybe nowhere. Maybe somewhere. But I know this, the next time I fall in love, if I ever do, it won't be with words. It'll be with evidence I can feel in my own bones. It'll be in how someone shows up, day after day, with no secrets tucked in a drawer under unpaid bills. It'll be in proof, stacked like tiny stones in the foundation of something real. And if that doesn't come? Then I'll be here, in my small, sunlit apartment, Milo chasing shadows across my floor, my life quiet and true and entirely mine. A few weeks ago, I sat at that same cafe, the one with the sleepy old Labrador and the chipped blue mugs. I had my laptop open, half-finished notes for a new project blinking at me from the screen, but my mind kept drifting. Out the big front window, the river glittered in the pale spring sun. Inside, someone's child giggled every time the barista rang the bell for a ready drink. It felt like the soft heartbeat of ordinary life, small, steady, comforting. Caleb walked in halfway through my second coffee. He didn't spot me right away, he was talking to the barista about pastries, pushing his glasses up his nose with the back of his wrist. I watched him for a moment. Not in the old way, not searching for hidden truths, but simply watching. Noticing. When he finally looked over and saw me, he smiled. Not the kind of grin that hides sharp secrets. Just an honest, startled smile that made me smile back without thinking. He came over, pulled out the chair across from me, careful not to bump my laptop. "Hey," he said. Simple. No excuses, no sweet talk. I asked how his week had been, and he told me about a lecture he'd gone to alone, how he'd sat in the back scribbling notes no one would ever read. He asked about my writing, not because he wanted to say the right thing but because he listened to my answers. Not just the words, the way my voice changed when I spoke about something that mattered. Sometimes, that's all the proof you need, a small thing, an honest moment. Not a big grand promise but something real, right in front of you, no spin, no show. After he left, I packed up my things and walked home along the river. Milo would be waiting for dinner, probably perched on the windowsill, watching pigeons like they owed him rent. I pictured him there, tail flicking against the glass. The thought made me smile, this tiny, ordinary life that used to scare me because I thought I needed something bigger to feel whole. When I unlocked my apartment door, Milo trotted over with his soft, grumpy meow. I scooped him up and held him against my chest, feeling his purr thrum through my ribs like a second heartbeat. There it was again, proof. The good kind. The kind you can hold in your hands and feel in your bones. I never told Ryan how much I knew. He never got the full story from me, no neat speech about how I'd traced every missing dollar, read every lie backwards until the truth fell out. He didn't deserve that neat ending. He got the mess he made and a door that closed behind me for good. Sometimes people ask if I hate him. If I wish I'd never met him at all. The truth is, I don't hate him. I don't even think about him much. But if you pressed me, if you asked whether I'd erase those years if I could, the answer would still be no. Because I learned the one thing I hadn't known I needed to learn, that you don't believe the story just because you want it to be true. That love isn't a promise whispered in the dark, it's action, repeated. It's receipts. It's facts. It's showing up when it's hard. It's telling the truth when it costs you something. Ryan taught me that. Or maybe I taught myself while he was busy spinning the lie. Either way, I paid for that lesson in full, and I own it now. Just like I own every piece of this quiet life I built from the ruins of his secrets. Sometimes Natalie asks if I'll ever remarry. I always laugh and say, maybe. Maybe not. If it happens, it happens. But he'll have to show me the receipts. She laughs too, but she knows I mean it. Proof. Always proof. Not cynicism, not bitterness, just the knowledge that love isn't real unless you can feel it, see it, touch it. Some nights, I sit on my second-hand couch with a cup of tea, Milo tucked under my chin, and I replay that last day, the soft click of the apartment door closing, Ryan's face blurring behind me. It doesn't hurt anymore. If anything, it feels like watching an old movie I've outgrown. I know how it ends. And I know how my story keeps going, one page at a time. Tomorrow, maybe I'll go back to that museum with Caleb. Or maybe I'll stay in, right until midnight with Milo's tail flicking across my keyboard. Maybe I'll do both. Because this life, this quiet, honest life, is wide enough now to hold anything I choose. I live by my own proof, my own rules, my own trust, earned and deserved. I lived for a year with a husband I thought was drowning in debts, and all along, I was the one paying the price for the lie. I paid it. I survived it. And now, every day, I remind myself, trust what you see. Trust what you can prove. And never, ever apologize for asking the questions that keep you free. That's my truth. No one can take it from me.